So this is the Jill way, as if I were in lab and you were actually in lab with me. This is how I would teach forearm to you. Every forearm muscle is named according to the following rules. The first name it is always given is its action. So you'll notice as we do forearms that it's extensor, flexor, abductor, whatever it is, that's always going to be the first name that the forearm muscles are given. The second is going to be its insertion. Now, we're learning origins insertions, but this is a very loose, vague term. It's not exactly its insertion, it's just the generalization. So if it inserts on the carpal bones, we call that carpi. If it inserts on the thumb, we're calling it pollicis. It's just a really generic insertion, so we know. And then the third term, if we need a third term, if there is just one muscle that has an action and insertion, it's the only one, we're done. That's all we call it. We don't have any more names. But if there are two muscles or three muscles that have the same action and the same insertion, then we give them more names, which is so fun. So the third and fourth names, I just kind of call these differential terms, but really what we see is the third term oftentimes would be the bone side it's on, or it could be, we see the tendon length, which would be longus or brevis. We also see, like in the case of digitorum, we'll see that one is more superficial than the other. So it's based on location. So maybe as opposed to bone side, we can call this location. Just how it is with the other muscle that it's associated, first two names are with. So let's go look at the cadaver. I'm gonna one-handedly, I kept a gloved hand on and trying to save gloves. So let's come look at this. I'm gonna look at a couple different cadavers. Forearms happen to be the thing most people hate or aren't a fan of in lab, but I want you to be awesome at it. So I'm gonna start with the whole arm. So Suzette's gonna zoom out a little bit and just show you this whole arm view here. I usually have my students start with our brachialis, which if you remember is sandwiched in between the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii. And if you see that brachialis muscle, right next to it, you'll see the brachioradialis muscle, which starts in the brachium and comes down to the radius. It's important you find this muscle because he doesn't follow the same rule as the rest of the forearm muscles. And he kind of is a divider. He rests on top of that pronator teres and supinator. But he's what is kind of our landmark for in between. Now, I hate mnemonics because I feel like once you get this down, you don't really need a mnemonic to remember your forearm muscles. But this first muscle right here, if we start and follow him, he's going to start, well, most of them start up here. But if you follow him, he ends right down here in the wrist area, which we know the wrist area is made up of our carpal bones. And it's important to note, so actions for the most part, all these forearm muscles are crossing over the wrist onto the dorsal side of the wrist, which would cause wrist extension. So anything on the fingernail side, this is all extension, and anything on the palm side is flexion. And the best way I can do this, most of these are actually attaching, well, the digitorum attach onto the fingers. So we're talking about wrist extension and we're talking about finger extension. So when you think about how to extend your fingers, if you extend your fingers real hard, you can feel those muscles contracting on that dorsal side of your forearm. If you flex them real hard, you can feel your muscles contracting on that palmar side of your forearm. So just to kind of orientate yourself. So fingernail side is extensor side, palm side is flexor side. So this first tendon, it has a buddy right with him, and both of them were both on the extensor side, and they both attach onto the carpal bone. But wait, there's this muscle out here too. Do you see him? He also attaches onto the carpal bone, and he's also on the extensor side. So here, and here, all three of these muscles are attaching onto the carpal bones, and they're on the extensor side. So now we have to give them a third name. So we know that all three of these muscles start with extensor carpi, but they can't all have the same name. So that's why we keep going. So both of these are on the radial side. We know that the radius is on the thumb side. This guy is on the ulnar side because we know that the pinky side is also the ulna, and you can kind of see that head of the ulna sticking out right there. So this guy's by himself and he's on the ulnar side. So this guy, we're done with him. His name, action, is extensor, insertion is carpi, and he's on the ulna side, so we call him ulnaris. So to say it all together, we have extensor, carpi, ulnaris. Then on the radial side, we have these two together. So we have action, we have extensor, insertion, carpi. Both of these are radialis, and now we're going to look at the tendon length because we have two of them and they both can't have the same name. So this guy on top has the longer tendon and this guy on bottom has the shorter tendon. So this guy on top would be extensor carpi radialis longus, and this guy underneath would be extensor carpi radialis brevis. Okay? So now we have three muscles that we know just based on my little trick that I taught you, okay? So extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and then back over here on the ulna, we have extensor carpi ulnaris. Now, I'm gonna show you this other forearm on the flexor side right next to it. Well, this is the right side, so that might be really confusing, but try not to be confused. So on the flexor side, we have this guy, which also inserts on the carpis right here. And then we also have this guy right here that also inserts on the carpis. And ignore him because he actually attaches into a tendon. You can see that tendon right there called the palmar aponeurosis, which he's attaching onto. So this guy and this guy both are on carpis, and we don't have two on the radial side like the other side. So this guy, his action is flexor, attachment, carpi, radialis, because he's on the radial side, but he's the only one. And then this guy, action, flexor, carpi, ulnaris. So we have 5 carpi muscles with the carpi in its name. So let's go back to the extensor side again. So we have extensor, carpi, radialis, longus, extensor, carpi, radialis, brevis, extensor, carpi, ulnaris. And then on the flexor side, just around the corner, if I lift this arm up, you can even see. So here's our extensor carpi ulnaris, and right next to him is the flexor carpi ulnaris. But showing you on here, so here we have the flexor carpi ulnaris, and then we have the flexor carpi radialis. So that is our carpis in a nutshell. Now we're going to move on to our digitorum. So digitorum refers to the fingers or the digits, as simple as that. So we're on the extension side. If I pull these tendons, I'm going to have the action of extension. So this is our extensor digitorum. Do I have more than that group? No, I don't. So I'm done. That muscle just gets 2 names. It's the only one that's extending the digits. The end. On the flexor side, it's a little more complicated. So ignore this guy. Actually, I'm just going to tell you, this guy is our palmaris longus because he is attaching onto the palm. He doesn't really follow all of my rules, but he has a longer tendon. There is a palmaris brevis. You don't have to know it, but the brevis part happens. We don't do that part in our class. So we have palmaris longus, and then underneath that, if you see here, we have this grouping right there. And then if you look even below that, we have even another group right there. So we have these 2 groups, 1 and 2. So we are on the flexion side. So we have flexor digitorums, both of these. But this guy, if you notice, sits on top of the other group. So this guy is our flexor digitorum superficialis, And this guy is our flexor digitorum profundus. Profound, when you say something profound, it's deep. So this is deep. That's what that means. Okay? So one's superficial, one's deep. So in a nutshell, we only have 3 digitorum groups. Back to the extensor side, we have extensor digitorum. That's it. It's the only one. And then we had the flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus. So we have the 5 carpi, we have the 3 digitorum, and now we just have to talk about the ones that go to the thumb, our pollicis muscles. So on our extensor side, we have this first big guy right there. If you follow his tendon goes out to the outside of the thumb right here. And as I say in my other videos, if you contract that muscle on the outside of the thumb, it's going to pull the thumb outward, causing that action, which is thumb abduction. Abduct means to take away. So with abduction, we have abductor pollicis, and it's a longus, which means it has a longer tendon. His associated buddy is actually right in here. You don't need to know him, but he has a very much shorter tendon. He's right on the thumb. He's in that fleshy fat part right there. So we do have to know the longus. We don't have to know the brevis. But that's why this guy next to him is not his pal. It's actually a different action muscle. So if you look at this little muscle and we follow his tendon, he comes to the top of the thumb. But look, here's this other guy. He's also coming to the top of the thumb. Do you see that? They both do. They both come to the top of the thumb. And if I follow back, there's this guy that comes to here to that muscle. And then there's this guy that goes all the way diagonal, and hiding under the extensor digitorum is this muscle right there. So between the two of these, they're going both to the top of the thumb. If I contract, that would cause this thumb to go back like that, which we would call thumb extension. So both of these are thumb extenders. So they both have extensor pollicis, but then this guy, if you notice, has a much shorter tendon than this guy. So this is our extensor pollicis brevis, and then that makes this guy the extensor pollicis longus. Now if we come to the flexor side, right under, this is our flexor carpi radialis, we should see this guy that has a feather looking, well, I call it a feather, like a feather pen. This is called a pennate muscle, where the striations just come off the tendon one direction. So here's our tendon kind of running right there. I'm trying to move palmaris longus out of the way, but I don't know if you can see kind of the white in there. That's the tendon. And then the muscle fibers run obliquely off of that. And this guy, if you were to follow him, he'd actually come on the underside of the thumb, causing thumb flexion. So this is our flexor pollicis longus. And he does have an associated brevis in this side of the thumb here too, along with the abductor pollicis brevis. So those two are buddies hiding in this part of the thumb. Not a thing you have to know, but that is why this is a longus, because it does have a brevis. So all the names that have longuses, there are associated brevises, whether or not they're actually on your list to know. So 3 thumb muscles. So we have this guy going to the outside of the thumb, abductor pollicis longus. This guy going to the top of the thumb, but a shorter tendon, extensor pollicis brevis. And this guy going to the top of the thumb, which is extensor pollicis longus. So abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus. And then as I pull that out, we have flexor pollicis longus, which really is sitting just below the flexor carpi radialis. And then those last 2 on the inner arm, if you remember, well, depends what order you watch these, so you may not remember. We didn't cover this, but here is our pronator teres, which is crossing from the ulna over to the radius. And so as I contract, it's going to pull that radius over the ulna, causing pronation. And then the supinator is right next to him going along the dorsal side, which as that contracts, it pulls the radius back this way, causing supination. So we have the supinator doing supination, and then the pronator teres doing pronation. And those are kind of in the middle of the arm. Here's our brachioradialis as a landmark. Those are actually both just tucked right underneath there, hiding in that kind of inner portion of the arm right there. So let's do that one more time. I'm gonna use this arm so we can just start and roll with it, okay? So let's start, let's find our brachioradialis. So I'm on thumb side, and I'm just gonna kind of go this way and wrap around, okay? And if you wanna do this all over again, feel free and start the video over again. But so here's our brachioradialis, which you remember we started with the brachialis. This is our full arm here. And then we find the brachioradialis. So that's kind of what we're doing. So here's our brachioradialis. Then we hit our first carpi. So he's stopping at the carpal bones. So we have our extensor carpi radialis longus next to him. Extensor carpi radialis brevis with the shorter tendon. Then we hit the first thumb muscle that goes to the outside of the thumb, abductor pollicis longus. Next to him, extensor, because we're top of the thumb, pollicis brevis. Then we have this big long guy hiding under the digitorum, which is our extensor pollicis longus. Then we have our group, which has an easy name, which makes your life simple for a second, our extensor digitorum. Then we hit this guy out here, which is our extensor carpi. I'm covering it, that's not helpful. Extensor carpi ulnaris. Now, as I turn the corner, so here's our extensor carpi ulnaris. I run right into our flexor carpi ulnaris. Suzette is sitting over here wanting to answer all my questions. I can feel it, but she's being good. Anyway, then remember this guy who's kind of a loose cannon. This is our palmaris longus that's long and sitting on top. And underneath him hiding is our group of the, not that guy, our flexor our flexor digitorum superficialis. Under that group, deep down here, is our flexor digitorum profundus. And then we have our, on top here, flexor carpi radialis. And under him, that beautiful feather one side muscle, flexor pollicis longus. And as I turn, here we have our brachioradialis again. So we have made full circle. And if you want to do it again, 18 minutes of awesome, go back to the beginning.